It's time to down tools for a bit. Welcome to the Tool Shed, the influential podcast for anyone and everyone involved in the building industry. Here's your host, Mick Hawes.
Hey there, before we kick off, I want to share a really important thought. 71% of you who watch this channel frequently don't subscribe. So if you've enjoyed any video you've ever watched, can you do me a favor and hit the subscribe button? It helps the channel more than you think, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests get. So let's go. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Tool Shed podcast. In this episode, I'm speaking to Byron Landeryou. He's a repeat offender. He's been on the podcast before. Some big things have happened since we've spoken last, so we'll unpack those when we get to have that chat. Before we get going, just need to remind you, if you haven't done this, because if you've ever watched the podcast before, you would have heard me encourage you to do the Builder's Freedom Readiness Scorecard. The link is in the description. If you're a builder that's been around for 10 years plus and you're still struggling somewhat with the financial situation, you've got some financial stress happening, or perhaps just a time freedom issue where you're still working big hours and it's not working out the way you thought, a great place to start is doing this 2-minute exercise. The link's in the description. Answer the questions. That will give you a score. Based on your score, you'll receive a report. That'll kind of give you the lay of the land, where you're at the moment, but it'll also give you a few ideas of actions you can take very, very specifically to help with the situation you're in now in that money and time space. So jump in and do that. Not right now. Listen to this podcast first. Byron is with us. We haven't spoken, I'm going to say, in maybe 2+ years. So a fair bit's happened there. So just to catch everybody up, just tell us a little bit about your background and how you got into this space with waterproofing and construction compliance, which is like really, really important. How did you end up in that space?
Well, thanks for the invite, Mick. And yeah, I think it has been over 2 years. And I think one of the last times you're on the webinar training series that I run around Australia. So how did I get into doing what I do?
Yeah.
Fundamentally, didn't really like school. Got into construction through a peer of mine. And, tiling and waterproofing was the area that I ended up landing in after doing a whole range of different things. 15 years on the tools, full-time, running my tiling waterproofing business. Then I got into teaching at trade school, and that was the first time that I had ever really studied the codes and standards. And a light bulb moment went off for me, or an aha moment, or an oh shit, depending on who you talk to. And it was the first realization that I had that as an industry, there'd been a lot of people get into the game the same way that I had, and that most of us had never really studied the codes and standards. And through that journey of teaching at trade school, I ended up leaving that and starting my own consulting business, where I was sort of laughed at initially. And now I run technical training around Australia via the means of webinars, seminars. I used to call it around waterproofing, but now it's probably evolved into more of wet area construction because waterproofing is just a layer of material within the building envelope, and it's really about understanding design, how we install our substrates, how we install the products that we are subjected to install to get a successful outcome. And in a built environment such as a bathroom or even a balcony, or we have nearly every trade on the job working in that one area. So it's quite complex and there's a lot to unpack, and it's really easy for people to get wrong.
Yeah. I just recall, as you mentioned, it was probably a couple of years ago, I participated in one of your webinars. So I was sort of doing a bit of a presentation. So I was part of it. But obviously, I'm not a builder. I don't do waterproofing, but I was involved in being exposed to this education around the technical side of it. And the thing that really blew my mind at that point was how complex it is and how much detail there is to understand. And now, like the last time we spoke, I was in a different place. So we've sold that place. We're now in a different environment. Right next to me here is a window that leaks because there's a problem upstairs on the balcony upstairs, the upper floor, and somehow the water goes through the slab into the sliding door and leaks and has ruined the carpet in here and what have you. Plus, like, this place was built back in 2014. We haven't experienced it yet, but apparently when it does rain quite a lot, there's a big groundwater issue in the building. And so a bunch of things probably haven't been done right. The cost of fixing that, I'm thinking it's going to be significant. But getting it right in the first place is just so important. And I just want your thoughts on the mindset. Like, what do we need to do to grab people to get them to understand how critical and how important this compliance is? Because many people would see it as a pain in the ass. The time taken to learn it all. I know that you know you've got great support programs to help people learn this sort of stuff, but there's also the legal side of it as well. So, you know, what message do we need to send to the people that are doing this work to make sure that they're right up to snuff as far as understanding what the current process is?
Yeah, I suppose it's a good question, and it's pretty consistent around Australia, I have to be honest. So this year alone, I ran or was involved in running training and seminars in nearly every state in Australia. And so through doing the training, talking to a lot of people, listening, learning as well, because although you're delivering training, you tend to learn. So you've got to be receptive to learning.
Yeah.
It's pretty consistent around Australia, and fundamentally it comes down to a lack of just doing the same thing over and over again and really never getting pulled up on it. And you don't know what you don't know. So a lot of people are building and making mistakes without knowing. Now that we're having a lot of regulatory changes, so we've seen the biggest changes in the construction industry ever, and people are starting to get caught out. There's a lot of more building inspectors now. The homeowners are a lot more aware that there's these serious defects and the prolonged effects that it can have. So the industry is changing. There is a momentum in the right direction. It had to take a shake in order to that to happen, and obviously that started in New South Wales with, you know, originally David Chandler getting on the front foot and the New South Wales Building Commission. Some figures so I was lucky enough to work with David this year at our seminars, and some figures that he sort of threw around. You know, if we look at an apartment, you know, post occupancy, you can look anywhere 30 to 40 grand to fix a leaking internal wet area or a balcony, you know, and that price could be a third before handover. Now, there's a building that I did an inspection on, or a defect report on, in Melbourne. I can't mention where it is, but 1,300 apartments, all with leaking internal wet areas, all have to be repaired. 40 grand a pop. You do the maths. And then that's excluding the relocation of the occupants. And if we're repairing an apartment building, you're looking at one floor will be getting repaired at the same time. You pretty much have to relocate the floor above and below. So you're relocating 3 floors at a time, and then you're repairing all of the internal wet areas. So the costs are astronomical. One thing that is going to be a drive for this is obviously insurance premiums. Insurance probably drives the wheels in industry faster than anything. but we're now starting to see some level of unification around Australia, because we operate in Australia as the ununited states of Australia. We have different rules for depending on where you live, but yet we all operate under a national construction code. So a lot of it is about people getting up to speed, and it generally takes 3 to 5 years from the rollout of for example, the new NCC, for the greater industry to start becoming really aware of it. And that's through my own experience. I don't have any physical data on that. So we are starting to see a shift from industry itself, Mick, which is great. The level of professionalism is going to go up, but it's still going to take a while to get there.
Yeah. So what are you seeing, both positive and, we'll also sort of unpack what still needs to be done. But a couple of years ago when I attended the webinar that you did and we had a chat on the podcast, I believe that it was around about that time that the NCC changes were being implemented. So it was kind of brand new then. So here we are sort of 2.5 years down the road. What have you seen has happened, has changed since the implementation of that, as far as the improvement or the reduction in, noticeable problems after handover, after project's been finished?
So there is definitely a greater level of professionalism amongst a portion of the industry. There's still, I would say, the greater industry probably undervalues the importance of what they're doing on the job site. And why is that the case? Well, we build so quick now. For a lot of the people who are involved in the built environment, they're not actually really ever meaningfully meeting the end consumer. So if you don't have a personal attachment to someone, I don't know, maybe you're not as emotionally invested. We're so busy. You've never been pulled up before. What I'm starting to see is, okay, New South Wales did lead the way. We're going to see some massive action in Victoria. I think Victoria will start to lead the way soon enough. And most of it is about talk around the industry and an awareness. And probably, to be honest, without the risk of sounding inappropriate, is the removal of some ego from people and realising, shit, maybe I am contributing to this without realising, because we all think we've never done anything wrong. And I'm the first one to put my hand up and say, I was making mistakes without realising. And that's probably why I'm good at teaching the training that I provide, because, I've lived the problem.
Yeah. And like, it's really interesting you say that, because after I attended the workshop, I had this knowledge, like I wouldn't have been able to do it, but I had the knowledge of what you were meant to do and what you shouldn't do, because that was all covered. And I just remembered after that, for a number of months, just listening in on conversations between builders when they were talking about wet areas and what they were doing with that wet areas and all that sort of stuff. And I knew just from what you had presented on that webinar that doesn't sound right. Like that, that doesn't sound like the right way of doing it. And I just wonder what needs to be said, what needs to be done to shift that mindset. Like you said, I love what you said there, that there is this disconnect between the person who ends up having to bear potentially the cost, but also the inconvenience and the frustration and all of the negative emotion when something isn't working properly in your home and you discover it, and then there's going to be this big cost and what have you. And like if the guys doing it were doing it for their grandma, their own grandmother, what sort of job would they do versus what sort of job if you're doing, like you say, 130 units to these nameless, faceless people? So that's one part of it. But there must have to be something else that needs to be said or done. Create awareness is one thing, but then complying with it and complying with it in a way because you want to is a whole nother story, because there's you've got to comply to it, and there's the fear factor that if you don't, you're going to get your wrist slapped and it's going to cost you and what have you. But it would be great to discover what needs to be done and said to get people to want to do this the right way.
Well, I think fundamentally what I see is most people are out there attempting to do a decent job.
Yeah.
Now, even the software that I've developed, I used to call it industry best construction. Industry best practice is quite hard to obtain or achieve. Probably if you're a builder working under cost plus, then you could go down that route. Okay, if you're working for an extremely wealthy client, or if there's no potential room for error at all. But for a large portion of the industry, we need to understand what good looks like. And good is good enough. Now, the NCC, the framework of the NCC, is the minimum requirement we can build to without getting sued. Now, that sounds ridiculous, but that's fundamentally what it is. Now, unfortunately, with the upgrade of the NCC, and if we're using waterproofing as the focus for the waterproofing of wet areas, they've made it ultra confusing. So in most states, you have two pathways to waterproof a bathroom, one being the housing provisions and the second one being AS 3740, which is a waterproofing standard. But in Queensland, you actually have three. There's a livable housing standard as well, or the Queensland Development Code, I should say. And I don't know why we've made it so confusing. It's ridiculous. The industry, so many people, I use the right lane mentality. So, I live an hour away from Melbourne, and when I got to travel into Melbourne, I'm traveling in the freeway generally pretty early. And in the right lane, it is all tradies. All tradies, whether it's a builder, tradie, whoever it is. Up your ass, move out of the way. And, they hound you. And I laugh because that was me when I was on the tools.
Yeah.
And there's no room for anything else apart from what you've got to get done on the tools for the day. So where we've got the old traditional classroom style setup, long training programs, your standard classroom style learning environment, that day superseded. There is a place for it, but we need to produce learning outcomes whilst people are on site. Now, that is something that we're focusing on, both at Waterproof Awareness and CompliBuild. We are working with builders and their trades to help audit the systems, make sure they're achieving compliance, identifying the risk, helping them understand the requirements, and then we help them implement it on site. So we are training people and verifying quality and compliance without them having to leave the job site. So it's a new way of doing things. And, if you asked me 20 years ago or 25 years ago when I started in construction, would I be doing this? Hell no. I didn't think I would. But I've had a vast array of experiences, right from doing the work, working with builders, writing defect reports, helping repair buildings, going to litigation, helping people avoid it, understanding people's numbers. So it's really important to hear you talk about someone's numbers in their business. The systems and processes we're helping people develop ultimately affects their bottom line and their profit margin. So before we used to see compliance as a pain in the ass, when you learn how to structure it correctly, we are helping people turn it into their competitive advantage.
Yeah.
And now we're in a digital space where everyone can review what your business does quite easily. If you're getting feedback from your clients and it is clearly identifying that you are a quality performer, you're innovative, you're ahead of the chain, you're continually learning, and you're protecting them, the end consumer, mate, you create your own economy.
Yeah. When we spoke last, you were getting started with the CompliBuild, but it didn't have that name back then, but you were working on something. And I just think that, like I was asking the question, what do we need to do to encourage people to want to do this rather than fear driven? You've got to do it, otherwise you're going to get into trouble. And I think one of the things that's really valuable is to remove friction. Like it might not get to the point where people just want to do this because they want to do it, but I think most people are quite fair and reasonable and want to do the right thing. And part of the problem comes because you've mentioned complication, confusion, and that creates resistance. That creates friction. And I'm assuming now, because I want to get into the tin tacks of CompliBuild, that it is designed to somewhat remove friction, remove the complexity, and remove confusion. So if you can unpack CompliBuild, its function, and who it's for, how it's used, so we can start to understand that, if I did have that tool, I would remove a level of complexity or a level of confusion and frustration.
Yeah, definitely. Good question. Thanks for asking. So CompliBuild, well, it was originally industry best construction, which is designed to help people create a project within the software, upload all the relevant documentation, set up systemized workflows, capture the evidence, verify that the evidence has been submitted correctly, and then we can generate a legal grade report which could be used as a digital compliance certificate. So that sounds like a mouthful. One of the hurdles we've got in the construction industry is that software has saturated the market.
Yeah.
Everyone's got a software for this. Our software is going to do everything in your business. It's going to help it run smoothly. But for most people, they actually do not need a lot of these features and functions that software manufacturers have sold to them. And so I've understood this, and we've taken quite a while to develop the software, and it solely focuses on quality and compliance. It's not going to run someone's business. It's very simple to use. We help do all the onboarding and the project setup. And for example, you can create a apartment building, if that was what you were working in, with 150 apartments. All the internal wet areas and balconies, we use waterproofing as case at point because that's where I focus on at the moment. But you can create all of the areas, all of the configurations, all of the checklists or ITPs, or quality control plans as we call them, because we're controlling the quality in minutes. And so what we're actually doing with builders is we're helping to audit their project. We identify what the risk is. We identify what's missing from the plans. We help them understand what that is. We help them implement it. We help them ensure that the products that are being installed to the codes, standards, and product manufacturers' requirements. And then whoever's doing the work can communicate directly to the builder, to us, verify the evidence, and spit out a detailed report, or if you want to use, a digital compliance certificate. So it's validating that the person doing the work has done it in accordance with the code standards and product manufacturers' installation guides. And the results that we've had already, even from just a trade contractor using it for their business, wherever it's in waterproofing, plumbing, HVAC, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. It's customizable for all trades. From where their reports started to where they are 6 months later is an astronomical result. And it's added such a high level of professionalism to their business that they're beating the work away with a stick. They can't take it on board. And so what's that allowing them to do is, well, they can charge a bit more because they can validate their level of quality. Now, for a builder who wants to go down a builder's audit pathway, they basically have me and my team in their pocket to assist them on a project and create a relatively cookie cutter style approach that they can use for years to come on any of their projects. So we identify the risk, we help simplify it all for them, we set the project up for them, they add the information in, send us the report, we review the report and then tell them how they went. And when they spit back that follow-up report to us, it is like me being the headmaster, being able to grade them on how well they went without me having to charge them or our team having to charge them, $1,000 or a couple of grand for an on-site inspection, because we can review it remotely. And we've got clients, builders all around Australia who are taking us up on this builder's audit because it's a game changer.
Yeah. You mentioned that I talked about numbers and how important that is. And what I'm thinking about when you're unpacking the CompliBuild idea is that one of the things it will do is prevent an error from happening in the first place. That's number one. That's the important thing. But I just don't think that many people really look at the cost of mistakes, because it's not. Let's say that there's an issue and the builder has to go back and fix this because it wasn't done properly. And let's say it costs the builder $5,000, which is a very small amount, but just as an example. What I believe that most people don't think, business owners don't think that what is really the cost of that $5,000? Because if you think, what is the profit margin of a business? And I work with builders all of the time, and I would say to you that most builders have no profit. But let's just say that they had 10% net profit. To repay that mistake, they've got to find $50,000 worth of additional work to bring them back up to the place where they were before they made the error. And then there's a whole lot of, effort and potential problems because you're doing that extra work. And I just don't think people think of it that way. And investing in something like what you've created with CompliBuild, as you said, I think it's a game changer, and it's just a preventative mindset. So it's so important to get people to start to think, yeah, I know it's compliance and I know it's a pain in the ass. I mean, last 3 years I was Commodore of the yacht club that I belonged to, and I've just, stood down in this last little while. But the compliance to go sailing is ridiculous, and everyone complains about it. Now you've got to put a crew declaration in, and the yacht club needs to know exactly who's on your boat for insurance purposes. They need to be a member of a yacht club for insurance purposes. And it all came to a head last year when a guy in a twilight race in Sydney got killed. It was his very first yacht race, and he got T-boned. He was sitting on the rail of a boat and got T-boned in the chest by another boat and got killed. And there was all sorts of issues raised about who could get into trouble. And it's just the way of the world now. Like we've got to adhere to the compliance. So we've got to look for the simplest ways to remove that friction. And it sounds like what you've built here is a tool that people can use to keep to get their ass out of the sling, but help them do the right thing as well.
Yeah, 100%. We're entering into a new era in construction. We've got to look at the next generation who's coming through. Everyone's digital. People like AI is going to fix, remove a lot of people. Well, they won't in construction. Okay, so AI can be used as a tool to support. So we're being very sort of strategic about the way we implement it into the business. So one thing that we are identifying already is that, builders and the greater audience are starting to understand that they don't need as much software as they might have, or the ineffectiveness of some of the software that they've got. One thing I have learned through developing the software, and I came off the tools, so I wasn't a tech head. So I've really built this tool to be functional on site and easy to use by the people who, I've grown up with, I've spent my whole time with, is that in digital technology, it is very hard to build a software that can do multiple different things effectively.
Yeah.
So I've focused to keep it simple, stupid, very easy to use. It's intuitive. We will be building in AI to support the user and simplify the process even further. And it'll talk to multiple different facets of someone who, like your email or, other different parts of your business that, you've got non-negotiable things that you can't get rid of. Because it's not going to run someone's whole business. It will actually help them make money in the long run because they're going to become very streamlined. They won't have to go back for reworks. They can see what's happening without having to actually be there. Everyone will get onto the same page. One of the issues that we're faced with in construction is because we're so busy, a lot of the trades don't actually know each other anymore. So, it's different if you're working remote and, you're in a smaller town, where all of the trades sort of know each other or know of each other. And I remember working down the coast, when I first came down the coast, a lot of the builders still did most of the things themselves because they didn't have access to the trades. So you've got a compatibility chain, you've got a sequence that's following each other. Whereas, when you've got multiple different builds on the go, it's just so easy to get it wrong. And now that we've got the changing requirements, there's been a reliance on the trade contractors to be an expert. The trade contractor expects the builder to be the expert. It's just so hard to have your finger on the pulse and be all over it. So that's fundamentally what we're helping people do, is to identify where they're going wrong, how they can improve it and streamline the processes to, furthermore, like one of the points you made on the lead-in, Mick, is get their time back. Because if they have to go back once, that's cutting into a percentage of their profit. If they've got to go back multiple times, then the profit margin just goes down the gurgler. So what are you working for?
Yeah,
you might as well
100%.
just be working for someone full time.
Might as well be flipping burgers at McDonald's.
Well, I've had this conversation with, a few people in the industry. Why are you running your business? What is the goal of what you're doing? Is it for lifestyle? Is it to sell? What are you doing? And, I, like most, I ran my tiling and waterproofing business, had no business economic training, didn't understand my numbers, didn't know how much I was making. And ultimately you run out of steam because you haven't got a goal that you're shooting after. So for builders and trade contractors, why are you running your business? Is it lifestyle? Is it facilitating the lifestyle? And some people have to ask the question, am I better off working for someone else or building this business up to try and sell. So that's another initiative that we're working on with trade businesses, is just getting their processes so sharp and streamlined so they don't have to go back. They know their numbers and they've got something that they can potentially sell in years to come, because a lot of people just get trapped in their business. So they don't know how to get out of it. And, they don't really have a goal or an outcome. Now, that's not for everyone. Some people just like, doing that, and that's fine. But it all comes down to fundamentally, and people see it as a boring term, but education and probably awareness about what it is you're actually doing, and having a third party independent review can help you identify that.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, this week, not sure when this will actually be going out into the wild, but for the purposes of the listener, when we're recording this this week, we've got the majority of our black belt members. We're all getting together face to face for a 2-day. We do it multiple times a year, and the focus on this 2 days is the psychology of happiness. And it's like, what the bloody hell's that got to do with a building business? Well, nothing and everything, because it's like the business is the platform that really is designed to give you the freedom to live the life you want, pursue what you want to pursue, give the people you love what you want to be able to give them. But it very rarely works out that way. And the other part of that is that you've got to be, you will perform better if you are happy rather than stressed and under the pump and all of that. So, what you're doing and what you're saying is so profoundly important, and it needs to be part of a conversation, and it needs to be part of people's thinking as well. Like, what the bloody hell am I doing this for? Because there's a lot you've got to learn. There
is, and I think the people who have worked with you, Mick, they would be more aware of this, and I think it's great that you're providing the service that you provide to try and help people become aware of what it is you're doing. A lot of builders are struggling. We've seen high insolvency rates. There was some data that we're seeing a lot in the construction industry, and what I presented on the events this year was, why aren't we getting new blood into the game? And fundamentally, the NCC or the construction industry, we rely on structure. We rely on the structure of the building to provide a safe and healthy building for the occupants. But yet, we actually haven't structured the pathway into construction that effectively at all. And there's been a bit of red tape, there's been some bureaucracy, there's been sweeping under the rug. All that stuff is the past. So all we can look for now is moving forward and go, okay, so how can we do this? And I used an analogy between allied health and the construction industry. And so some of the constraints entering into construction is low pay, it's too physically demanding, there's long hours, poor work-life balance. Most industries are long hours. In terms of construction, low pay is an interesting one. Because I use the analogy or the comparison between an osteopath and someone entering into construction. So it was a waterproofing seminar that we ran, so I'll use a waterproofer. So the Certificate 3 is the trade level qualification. And in Australia, most tradies do not have that qual. Plumbers and sparkies, yes. Carpenters are meant to, not all of them do. Some are just, subbies who work as a part of a crew or whatever. And we have bricklayers, but a majority of trades, no Cert 3. So if you've got nothing to shoot for, then where do you go? You get onto the tools. I'm just going to be a waterproofer for my whole life. Now, for some people, that's fine, and that's okay. And you can earn good coin now. I've seen, waterproof is $50, $60 an hour as a company employee, which is decent coin. So this is why I say to some people running a trade contractor business, if you're not earning that sort of money while you're running your business, then you're probably doing more hours and earning a shitload less. So wouldn't you be better off just going into, a structured environment? Is that going to be better for your headspace? So if we look at osteopaths, for example, 3 to 5 years of study. For the first 3 years, they're working part-time at, wherever it is, at a bar, whatever it is. So they're not earning good coin at all. And they're accruing a HEC stack of, 43 to 50K. And it's not until they're full-time employee when they start earning, some decent bank. And once they start earning that decent bank, they've got to pay back that 43 to 50K HEC stack or help deck debt. But whereas if you enter into construction, most people enter in via the labourer pathway.
Yep.
And then, they work for a company and then they become a skilled labourer, and there's been no enforcement to get your cert through. But we're going to see trade registration and licensing get rolled out around Australia, and it should be. Now, they can earn in that 4 years' time, or let's say the same window that the osteo had to go to study uni, they're earning somewhere around 300 grand wage, not really having to pay much back. So they're almost 50% in front by the time it's taken them to learn their trade. Then, with some continual learning, they can become a consultant. And so they're way in front. But in construction, we don't have a clearly structured career pathway. So most people go, it's dead end. So there is a massive opportunity that's coming before us in Australia in terms of the construction industry, and the opportunity and potential. You've got to remember, I started as a tiler who did not do an apprenticeship, a formalised one. I learnt waterproofing on site like most people did through product manufacturers training. Then, I got verified my skills. I went to, trade school and, did my gap training, etc. And, lucky enough to become a teacher and was able to join the dots that way. And now I became a consultant. No formal pathway for me to do this. I just made it happen. But I'm a clear example of, if we structured this correctly, then there is no reason why anyone couldn't do what I'm doing now. But we just haven't sold it that well. So, and not everyone's going to strive to do this. I mean, I'm pretty driven. But why am I driven to do this? I just got sick of being part of the problem. Writing these defect reports, helping the builder, writing a report against the builder, the subby, helping the homeowner. It's a nightmare. So the great Australian dream, unfortunately, for most at the moment, is the great Australian nightmare. And the data's telling us that. So in New South Wales or in Australia, so for water-related building defects, $4 billion a year.
Wow.
And that's for class 2 to 9 buildings. So that's not even houses. And then some data from earlier this year. Sydney, $700 million alone for building defects. Victoria, $675 million a year.
That's insane.
The figures are... So in the industry, really the data's only... The meaningful data, the measurable data, has only been coming in for the last 7 years. It's that data that is now shaping the landscape. You try and get PI insurance as a consultant, and if you're in the waterproofing space, it's extremely difficult. So where there's a big problem, there's also a massive solution, Mick. So, or opportunity, and I'm very much an optimist. I'm very positive and confident about what the future looks like in construction. because now everyone's started to go, shit, there is a drama here. I need to, light the fire again. I need to learn. I need to reinvent. And when you do that, everything starts to move forward, because it's either you're going forward or backward.
Yeah.
Inflation teaches us that. There's no sitting still.
Yep.
It's either up or down. And so I welcome people to reach out post this podcast. If you're a builder and the NCC confuses you, waterproofing confuses you, wet area construction confuses you, we are getting some really extremely positive outcomes without a time poor exercise or that costly, to be honest. It's a return on investment significant, and anyone who works with us turns around and says, mate, that's changed the game for me forever.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, prevention is better than the cure every day. So it's so much, makes so much sense. I just want to thank you for coming back on to the show, telling us about CompliBuild, helping us to understand, what's going on, the lay of the land, and the things that we need to be aware of. The main thing that I just wanted to say is that in this podcast, we're always looking for people who have a passion toward improving the building industry as a whole, and you contribute to that in spades. So it's great to have another conversation with you, find out what you're up to, help more people become aware of what you're up to, because it's only a good thing. It can only be a good thing by, jumping on your website, having the conversation with you, looking at things like tools like CompliBuild, because as I said a second ago, prevention is far better than the cure. And instead of us trying to, figure out a way to pay for all of the problems, the $675 million problem you just talked about then, what if we had a preventative approach? And didn't what could all of those resources that are going to fixing it now, they could go towards something far more proactive and valuable. So just wanted to give you a tip of the hat for what you're doing and how you're contributing to the industry and putting your time aside to be so generous to jump on the show with us.
Oh, Mick, I appreciate the opportunity to come on. It's been good to come on after a couple of years, mate. Good to see your face, and I know we haven't had the chance to catch up. We're both pretty busy. So I appreciate the opportunity. Try to keep it simple, stupid, remove the BS. Really want to get positive outcomes. I recommend you check out the CompliBuild website. So CompliBuild, spelled with an I, complibuild.com.au. Make an inquiry. You can jump on social media and we're on there, and you'll see what we're posting in terms of content. Solely here to try and help people navigate this next phase in construction. And we're pretty grateful to have the opportunity to do what we do, and we're passionate about good outcomes for all people involved. So once again, Mick, I appreciate the opportunity, and I hope to meet some of your attendees or your followers and people part of the business black belt in the near future. Yeah.
Perfect stuff. We'll make sure that we put all of the links to the website and social media in the description and the show notes for the podcast. So it's been fantastic, but just really appreciate you being on. Once again, I'm sure this won't be the last time we will be talking. So there you have it, folks. All of the links that you need to reach out and check out CompliBuild. Have a conversation with Byron, and I can't emphasise enough, well, at least how much I believe in a preventative approach rather than figuring out the cure after the horse is bolted, and this just makes so much sense. Nothing we can do about it now, so we need to move forward, and having someone like Byron in your corner that can guide you through the complexity and what have you, it would be invaluable. So we'll make sure you click on the links and have that conversation. Before we go, I just want to remind you about the Builders Freedom Readiness Scorecard. The link will be in the description. 2 minutes. Based on your score, you'll get some very simple actions that you can implement that will make a difference from a time perspective and a financial perspective with your business. And I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you about those results and point you towards some resources that are going to help you implement that as well. All you need to do is shoot us a message, a comment, or just connect through LinkedIn. We can do that and we can jump into a conversation. But we'll be back with another episode of the Tool Shed podcast. Before you know it, I'm Mick Hawes from Builders Business Black Belt. That is all. I am out. Bye for now.
You've been listening to the Tool Shed. If this podcast struck a chord with you, make sure you spread the word by sharing it with your mates in the building industry. We love your help to make the building industry better for everyone involved.